For years, if you wanted to get a patent in Brazil, you were playing the long game. And I mean a really long game. We're talking about waiting up to 15 years. Yeah, 15, just to get your innovation protected. But that has all changed. So today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of how Brazil's patent office tackled this massive, seemingly impossible backlog, and what this whole new landscape means for innovators right now. Let's get into it.
So here's our roadmap. First, we'll get a handle on just how bad the old backlog problem was. Then, we'll look at the brilliant plan that led to this dramatic turnaround. We'll break down what patent timelines look like today, and that leads to a critical new choice that applicants have to make. We're even going to investigate a pretty surprising paradox behind some of the delays that still exist, before we wrap up with the path ahead for Brazil.
All right, first things first. We have to set the stage and really understand the scale of this challenge. Let's talk about Brazil's patent backlog problem, or as I've been thinking of it, the long wait for innovation.
Yeah, you heard that right. 15 years. Just let that sink in for a second. It was totally normal for an inventor to come up with something amazing, something revolutionary, and then have to wait a decade and a half for the official paperwork to catch up. That was just the reality on the ground for innovators in Brazil.
But then, something started to shift, and it shifted in a big way. This brings us to the turnaround. The story of the plan that, against all odds, actually worked.
So, what did they do? Well, the strategy was kind of genius in its simplicity. Back in 2019, the Brazilian Patent Office, the BRPTO, kicked off its Backlog Combat Plan. And the core idea was this. Instead of starting from scratch, they'd use the examination results from other major patent offices around the world for the very same invention. Fast forward to 2025, and it was obvious the plan was a monstrous success. Which brings us to right now, where we've got fresh data that paints a really clear picture of what's going on.
And to really get how big of a deal this was, you gotta look at the before picture. Before this plan, there were more than 147,000 patent applications just sitting there, stuck in the queue. A literal mountain of innovation just waiting. And the after? Wow. By 2025, that mountain had been whittled down to just over 1,000 applications. I mean, from 147,000 down to 1,000. That is an absolutely mind-blowing reduction, and it just shows you how effective this strategy really was. Okay, so the historic backlog is gone. Great news, right? Well, yes, but it's not quite that simple. It doesn't mean that every single patent application now zips through at the same speed. So let's look at the new numbers and see what the timelines are actually like today.
All right, this table right here, this is the core of the new data. It breaks down the average wait time by different technical fields. What you really want to pay attention to is the total time from the day something is filed. And as you're about to see, there are some pretty major differences depending on what kind of invention you're working on.
Let's just visualize this so it's super clear. On average, the total wait is about 4.4 years. Not bad. But if your patent is in polymers, hey, you're on the fast track, about 3.4 years. But then you look at the other side of the coin, like biopharmacy, and whoa, that can take over 6 years. This difference from one field to another is absolutely key to understanding the system as it is today.
So this new, faster system creates a really fascinating situation for inventors. It all boils down to what we're calling the applicant's choice. And it's this fundamental trade-off you have to make between getting it done fast and having room to adapt.
Now here's the rule change that makes this choice even possible. It's a real game changer. Just this year, in 2024, the BRPTO completely flipped the script. They stopped organizing the examination line based on when you first filed your patent. Instead, the line is now organized by when you officially ask for the examination to start. This is huge because it puts a ton of control right back into the hands of the applicant.
So let's break down that trade-off. You can request your examination early. The pro? You get a decision, fast. The big con, though, is that once you push that button, you're pretty much locked in. You can't make amendments that broaden what your patent covers, or you can wait. You actually have up to 3 years to make that request. The pro there is you've got more time to tweak, to amend, to get your claims just right. The con, obviously, is that it's a slower path to a final decision. You can see how a hungry startup might go for speed, while a huge corporation might want to play the long game.
And the source material just sums it up perfectly. It says that applicants now have to balance having a faster protection versus having a proper protection. That's it, right there. It's a real strategic decision, and it depends on your invention, your business, and how confident you are in your initial claims.
Okay, remember how we saw some of those sectors were way slower than others? Well, let's zoom in on one of them, because there's a really strange story hiding in these numbers.
let's talk about the telecommunications paradox. So, what is this telecommunications paradox all about?
Well, on the one hand, the data shows that the total time it takes to get a telecom patent, from filing day to final decision, is a pretty long 5.7 years. That puts it among the slowest sectors.
But, and this is the wild part, the moment an examiner actually picks up that telecom application and starts the real technical work, a decision gets made in just 51 days on average. 51 days. That is incredibly fast. So, what does that tell us? A super long wait, but a super fast examination. Well, it suggests the bottleneck isn't how complicated the patents are. It points to a resource problem. It seems there's been a persistent challenge in hiring and keeping enough qualified examiners in the telecom field, in a sector that moves so quickly. It's tough, so the applications are basically just sitting in line waiting for an expert to become free.
Okay, let's pull all of these threads together and talk about what this all means. Let's look at the progress and the path ahead.
And the progress is absolutely continuing. In the last trimester that was reported, a full 80% of the BRPTO's decisions were on patents that were filed way back in 2021 or even earlier. This just shows that they are methodically working their way through that remaining pile and closing the time gap for good.
So let's do a quick recap. What are the big takeaways here? Number 1. Brazil has made huge advances and cleared its notorious historical backlog. That's a massive win for innovation. 2. Timelines today are not one-size-fits-all. They really vary by technical field. 3. This new system gives applicants a really important strategic choice. Do you want speed or do you want flexibility? And finally, number 4. Challenges definitely still remain, especially in having enough specialized examiners for hot fields like biotech and telecommunications.
So where does all this leave us? Brazil has pulled off something pretty remarkable by slaying this giant patent backlog. The big, multi-billion-dollar question now is, what does having a predictable, efficient patent system mean for its future as a global hub for innovation? I think it's safe to say the whole world is going to be watching to find out.